the day it started unraveling was impossibly bright. You know the kind, sunlight pouring through the windows like it has something to prove. I was 6 months pregnant, and my ankles were swollen enough that I had to give up on shoes with backs. The baby had started kicking more, always around 2 p.m., like she had her own little schedule already. I should have been resting. But instead, I was on my hands and knees in the kitchen, scrubbing at some invisible stickiness on the tile, tears stinging my eyes though I couldn't have told you exactly why. Maybe it was the hormones, or maybe it was the way John had said, "The floor's still gross," that morning, no thank you, no smile, just annoyance. And maybe it was how he didn't kiss my forehead like he used to. Maybe it was all of it. My name is Melissa Harper. I'm 32 now. But back then, I was 31 and still pretending everything was okay. I believed we were a team. I believed my husband loved me. I believed the worst thing I had to worry about was choosing the right shade of green for the nursery walls. Then Karen showed up. I almost didn't answer the door. I was sweaty, tired, wearing a maternity top with a stain near the collar, but something in me said get up. And when I opened it, her face told me everything before she even spoke. Her skin was pale, like all the blood had drained from it, and her eyes, usually bright, even when delivering bad news, were hollow. "Melissa," she said, almost in a whisper. "I need to tell you something, and I'm so sorry." She stepped inside before I could say anything. Her hands were shaking. "I saw John today," she began. "At the Marlowe Hotel." I felt my heart tighten, but I still didn't know where she was going. Why would he be at the Marlowe? Karen swallowed hard. He wasn't alone. Julia was with him. Time stopped. "Julia?" She nodded. They were coming out of a room together. She was holding his arm. And then, they kissed. I sat down slowly, as if the weight of her words had pulled me to the floor. My hands rested on my belly like instinct, like I could somehow shield my daughter from this. "They kissed," I repeated. Karen nodded, again. I didn't want to believe it either. But it was them. Clear as day. "I'm sorry, Mel." My mouth felt dry. I stared past her, into the space where our bookshelf stood, at the baby books lined up in neat little rows. The world had turned surreal. Julia, my best friend since college. She was in our wedding. She was the one who brought me ice cream when I had a miscarriage 2 years ago. And now she was the one coming out of a hotel room with my husband? I need a minute," I whispered. Karen nodded. She didn't say more. She just stood there in the kitchen with me for a while, like a witness to a crime scene too sacred to disturb. When she left, I went to the nursery. I sat on the floor beside the tiny crib I'd assembled last week and let myself fall apart. Silent tears. No screams. Just the quiet collapse of a life I thought I understood. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark, eyes wide, staring at the ceiling while John came home late. Again. He smelled faintly of cologne I didn't own and didn't speak as he undressed. I waited until morning. He was half asleep, his voice gravelly when he mumbled, "What are you doing up?" I turned on the bedside lamp. "How long has it been?" He blinked. "What?" "You and Julia." His face went still. "She saw you," I said. "Karen saw you at the Marlowe Hotel. Holding her. Kissing her." He sat up slowly, running a hand through his hair. "Melissa, don't." "How long?" I repeated, my voice shaking but louder this time. He didn't answer. I stared at him, this man I had trusted with my body, my heart, our child, and saw someone I didn't know. "I've given you everything," I whispered. "I believed in you. And this is what you do to me?" His jaw clenched. "Things just happened. Julia and I." I stood. "Things just happened?" I was shaking. "You destroyed our life for something that just happened?" He looked away, like he couldn't stand to see me anymore. "You've changed. You're always tired, always stressed. You're not fun anymore. I stared at him. I'm growing a human being inside me, John. He didn't respond. Didn't move. Just sat there, letting me carry it all, like I always did. That night, I packed a suitcase. Just the basics. Some maternity clothes, my toothbrush, and the ultrasound picture of our daughter, the one where her tiny fist was curled like she was ready to fight. John was asleep when I left. Breathing evenly, peacefully, like a man without guilt. And me? I stepped out into the cold night air with a belly full of life and a heart shattered into pieces. But it was mine. All mine. And I wasn't going to waste another second living in someone else's illusion. I didn't go to my mother's. I didn't go to a friend's. I went to a motel, one of those modest little places tucked behind a gas station off Route 9. The kind with stiff sheets and humming radiators. I needed somewhere anonymous. Somewhere no one would ask questions I didn't have the energy to answer. The clerk didn't even blink when I checked in. He handed me a keycard, barely looking up from his register. I was just another woman with bags under her eyes and nowhere to be. That first night, I lay on the creaky mattress with my hand on my stomach, whispering to my daughter. "It's okay, baby," I said. "We're going to be okay." I didn't cry, not then. I was too numb for that. But the next morning, when I went to make coffee and saw the two styrofoam cups sitting side by side on the dresser, something about it made me weep. Maybe it was because I always poured one for John. Even when he didn't ask. Even when he'd forgotten to say thank you. I'd do it anyway, because it's what you do for the person you love. And now? Now I couldn't even remember the last time he made one for me. The days passed slowly. I didn't tell anyone where I was. I ignored Julia's texts. Yes, she had the audacity to text me. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she wrote. "I never wanted to hurt you." The betrayal was so layered it felt like a joke. She had held my hair back when I had morning sickness. She knew the names we'd picked for our daughter. She had touched the very fabric of my life, and then ripped it apart. By the third day, John started calling. At first, it was angry, "Where the hell are you?" Then confused, "Can we talk?" And finally, desperate, "Melissa, please, come home. We can work through this." Work through this? I sat on the edge of the motel bed listening to his voicemails with my hand over my mouth. He sounded like a stranger. Or maybe he'd always been a stranger, and I was only just now hearing him clearly. I didn't answer. Instead, I opened my journal, the one I'd started during my first trimester, and wrote everything down. Every lie. Every moment that now seemed suspicious in hindsight. Every time he'd come home late, or pulled away when I tried to cuddle, or said, "Julie is just helping us get organized for the baby shower." I saw it all now. I made a list, like I used to do in college when I felt overwhelmed. Only this list wasn't for assignments. It was for what came next. Find a lawyer. Find an apartment. Open a new bank account. Schedule an OB checkup without him. Breathe. I couldn't control the betrayal. But I could control my next steps. One night, as I lay in bed staring at the water stain on the ceiling, I thought about the moment I'd met John. We were at a bookstore. I was crouched in the aisle with a copy of The Bell Jar in my hands. He made some charming comment about Sylvia Plath and we started talking. It felt electric then, real. But now, I wondered, was he always pretending? Or did he just stop trying somewhere along the way? The next morning, I called him. He answered on the second ring. "Melissa? I want you out of the house by Friday," I said. My voice was calm, steady, surprisingly so. He was silent for a beat. Then, "You don't mean that." "I do. I'll be by to pick up a few things." "Don't be there. Can't we just talk? Please. Let's go to counseling. This doesn't have to be the end." "John," I said, my throat tightening. It already is. I hung up. It was the first time I'd ever said goodbye to someone who hadn't physically left me yet. I returned on a Thursday afternoon. It had rained that morning, and the driveway was slick and shining. The hydrangeas I planted last spring were bent under the weight of it all, like even the flowers had grown tired. John's car was gone, just like I'd asked. The house was quiet, too quiet. I stood on the front step for a moment, keys in hand, trying to summon the courage to walk into a life that no longer felt like mine. When I stepped inside, the silence hit me like a wave. It wasn't just the absence of sound, it was the absence of meaning. The scent of his cologne still lingered faintly in the hallway. A pair of his shoes sat by the front door, forgotten or maybe left there on purpose. Our wedding photo was still on the mantel. I walked over to it, staring at the two smiling people frozen in time. I didn't recognize that version of us anymore. I packed slowly. Deliberately. I didn't want to rush, and I didn't want to think too hard. Just grab the essentials. Maternity clothes. A few books. My grandmother's locket. The hospital bag I'd been assembling, still half done in the closet. I found a pair of baby socks on the floor of the nursery, tiny, mint green, softer than air. I held them against my palm and cried, really cried, for the first time since everything broke open. Not because of him, not even because of Julia. I cried for the family I thought I was building. For the mornings I'd imagined, holding a baby between us in bed, laughing at how she looked more like him. For the bedtime routines I'd rehearsed in my mind, the lullabies I sang softly under my breath when I was alone. For the we that had become just me. I left the photo on the mantel. I couldn't bring myself to touch it. But I did take the one from the ultrasound, the printout with our daughter's profile, her nose already shaped like mine, her hand curled under her chin like she was deep in thought. That picture, I folded carefully and tucked into my wallet. Before I left, I stood in the kitchen one last time. This was where he told me we couldn't afford a new stroller. Where Julia once sat drinking wine, complimenting the backsplash I'd chosen. Where I learned how to make his favorite chili, burning the first batch and laughing until my stomach hurt. It wasn't just a kitchen. It was a collection of moments I didn't know I'd have to grieve. I took one final look and walked out. But before I closed the door, I left something behind, on the table, right where he'd see it. The keys to our house. The journal I had written in all those months. And on top of it, a sticky note. You already chose her. This is me choosing myself. I moved into a small apartment above a bakery 2 towns over. The ceilings were low, the floor creaked, and the heating was inconsistent, but it was mine. The first night, I lay in bed listening to the soft hum of the oven below, the faint clatter of pans and trays long after closing time. There was something comforting about it. Warm, even. Like I wasn't entirely alone. My body ached constantly. I was 7 months pregnant now, and every movement felt heavier, like gravity had turned up just for me. But I was sleeping better. Deeper. More peacefully, even with the nightmares. John tried calling a few more times, and then he stopped. Maybe he understood I was serious. Or maybe he simply replaced me in the same quiet way he'd started to drift before. Either way, the silence was a relief. The hardest part was explaining to people what happened, where he was, why I suddenly showed up to the baby shower alone. My cousin Allie hosted it in her backyard, a modest little gathering with paper lanterns and carrot cake. Everyone was kind, but their eyes lingered too long, and no one quite knew what to say. Julia didn't come. I suppose part of me hoped she would. Not because I wanted to see her, I didn't, but because I wanted her to feel ashamed. I wanted to look her in the eye and make her feel what I felt. But of course, that wasn't her style. She'd always been good at disappearing when things got complicated. Instead, I stood beside the gift table, thanking strangers for baby bottles and onesies while swallowing the lump in my throat. I was trying to smile when Allie came up behind me and whispered, "You don't have to do this alone, you know." I turned to her, my eyes glassy. "But I am." No, she said, firmer this time. You're not. And she meant it. Allie was the first person who didn't tiptoe around me. She came over once a week after that, bringing takeout and folding laundry while I waddled around organizing burp cloths. She helped me build the crib in my tiny bedroom, even though we both got stuck trying to figure out the instructions and ended up calling a neighbor for help. We laughed so hard that night we nearly woke the whole building. She never asked for details about John. Never said, "What happened?" or "Are you okay?" She just showed up. And that, I realized, was the most healing thing anyone could have done. One evening, I sat on the floor with my belly cradled in my hands, breathing through a sharp cramp that made me wince. The baby kicked, twice, and I smiled. "You and me, kid," I whispered. "We're going to do just fine." I started writing again. Not in the journal I'd left behind, but in a fresh notebook with yellow pages and a soft linen cover. I wrote letters to my daughter. I told her about the rainstorm the night I left. About the motel. About the moment I stopped believing in fairy tales. But I also told her about the way it felt to rebuild, how every tiny act of independence felt like a brick in the foundation of a new life. I told her the truth. Not the edited version. Not the clean, packaged one people post on social media with filtered smiles and matching outfits. I wrote the raw version, because she deserved to know how strong she made me. And in those pages, I began to feel something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Labor started the way the book said it might, slow, vague, like a whisper rather than a shout. It was just before 5 a.m., and the sky was that deep, endless blue that only exists before dawn. I was brushing my teeth when I felt a tug deep inside me. Not pain exactly, but a knowing. It was time. Allie arrived 20 minutes after I called. She showed up with coffee, extra socks, and a level of calm that made me burst into grateful tears before we'd even left the apartment. "I've got you," she said, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "You're not doing this alone." The hospital was quiet, eerily so. A nurse guided me into a room while Allie handled the paperwork. I changed into a gown and stared at the ceiling tiles, counting the slow, rhythmic hums of the machines beside me. For hours, it was just the two of us, me and the baby. The nurse checked on us every now and then, offering encouragement, adjusting monitors. Allie read out loud from a baby name book, making jokes, trying to keep the mood light. I hadn't chosen a name yet. Maybe part of me was waiting to meet her. Maybe part of me had just been too scared to decide without John. But now, in the quiet of that sterile hospital room, as the contractions grew sharper and the world narrowed into breaths and pushes, I realized something important. This child? She wasn't a symbol of what I'd lost. She was the beginning of everything I hadn't dared to hope for. The delivery wasn't easy. There were complications. Her heart rate dropped once, twice. I felt like I was floating outside my body, clinging to Allie's hand, begging for it to end. There was a moment I thought I might not make it through. And then, she cried. It was raw and immediate and louder than I imagined something so small could be. And just like that, she was in my arms, eyes squinted shut, fists balled tight, her entire body curled into me like she'd known me forever. "I've got you," I whispered, my voice hoarse, shaking. "We've got each other." Her name came to me without effort. Claire. It meant clear, bright. A light through the fog. And she was all of that and more. They wheeled us into recovery. The nurses cooed and checked her vitals. Allie stood nearby, snapping a photo when I wasn't looking. It captured something I didn't realize I was radiating: joy. Real joy. The kind that bubbles up not in perfect moments, but in the aftermath of storms. Later, when it was quiet again, I looked at Claire sleeping in her little bassinet, her tiny chest rising and falling in that rhythmic way that only newborns breathe. John hadn't called. He hadn't shown up. I didn't even tell him. And as I lay there, watching this perfect little stranger who had made a home out of my broken body, I knew something for certain. I didn't need his apology. I didn't need closure. And I sure as hell didn't need to share this moment with someone who hadn't earned it. Claire was 4 weeks old when John finally reached out. It came as a text, not a call, short, impersonal, like he was asking if I still had his charger. I heard. Congratulations. I'd like to meet her. No apology. No acknowledgement of what he'd done. Just a request to step back into the life he shattered, as if nothing had happened. I stared at the screen for a long time. Part of me wanted to scream. Part of me wanted to write back, to unload every ounce of pain I'd buried beneath midnight feedings and diaper changes. But most of me just felt empty. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened the notebook again. The one with yellow pages where I'd been writing to Claire. I wrote a new letter, this time, not for her, but for him. I wrote it in one sitting, pen racing across the paper like it couldn't get the words out fast enough. Dear John. You missed her first cry. You missed the quiet moments after, when her fingers curled around mine like she was anchoring me to this earth. You missed her tiny hiccups and the way her lip quivers when she dreams. You missed the way she looks exactly like you, though that's not something I say out loud. You missed the most important moment of your life. And I won't let you come back just because you're curious. You had your chance. You traded it for hotel hallways and secrets. I don't need you to co-parent with guilt or visit out of obligation. I will not hand her over to someone who only wants the title of father but not the responsibility. She deserves presence. She deserves loyalty. She deserves truth. And I will make sure she gets all of it, even if it means doing it alone. Melissa. I didn't send it. It wasn't for him, it was for me. Proof that I could speak the truth and still choose silence. A few days later, I filed the official paperwork, sole custody, no visitation. I listed John as the biological father, because facts are facts. But when the social worker asked if he would be involved, I simply said, no. Claire was thriving. She'd started making soft cooing sounds and smiled in her sleep. I took pictures daily, most of them blurry because she moved so much. But each one was a record of the life we were building without him. I got a part-time job doing freelance editing from home. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept us afloat. Allie helped with daycare on days I had too many deadlines. And somehow, day by day, the impossible became routine. There were still hard nights. Nights when I lay awake, exhausted, wondering how one person could stretch themselves so thin and still be expected to love with their whole heart. But then I'd feel Claire stir beside me. Her warm little body pressed against mine. Her breath, steady and certain. And I'd remember. He might have lived a double life. But this one, this honest, messy, beautiful one, was ours. Claire is 7 months old now. She laughs like it's a full-body experience, head back, hands waving, her whole being committed to the sound. Sometimes when I hear it, it catches me off guard. Not because it's unexpected, but because it's so free. So pure. She doesn't know yet what disappointment sounds like. Or what it feels like to be lied to. And I'm doing everything in my power to keep it that way for as long as I can. We have our rhythm now. Mornings with warm bottles and sing-alongs. Walks to the park where she stares at trees like they're telling her secrets. Evenings where I rock her to sleep in the soft glow of a string of fairy lights I hung up in our tiny living room. It's not the life I planned, but it's real. And real is better. A few weeks ago, I saw John. It wasn't planned. I was at the pharmacy picking up teething gel, and there he was, across the aisle, holding a box of cough drops. Our eyes met. His jaw clenched. He looked tired. Older. Like life had caught up with him. And maybe it had. I felt my heart rate quicken, but I didn't panic. I didn't turn away. I stood tall, Claire nestled against my chest in her carrier, her little hand clutching the strap like she owned the world. He walked over slowly, like he wasn't sure if I'd bolt. She's beautiful, he said. She is. There was a pause, long, awkward, the kind that swallows people whole. I made mistakes, he said. Yes. You did. Another pause. Then, I wish I could take them back. I looked him in the eye. I don't. He blinked. You don't? If you hadn't made those choices, I might still be with you. I might still be shrinking myself to make you comfortable. Still trusting someone who didn't deserve it. You showed me who you were. And because of that, I got to find out who I am. He looked down at Claire, his eyes softening. Can I? No, I said gently. You don't get to walk in now. She's not a curiosity. She's a person. And she doesn't need confusion this early in life. He nodded, slowly. Okay. I understand. And to his credit, he walked away without a fight. I stood there for a while, holding Claire a little tighter, her head resting on my shoulder. She didn't stir. Just kept sleeping, safe and warm against me. That night, I lit a candle in the living room and wrote one last letter in my journal. Not to Claire. Not to John. To myself. You did it. You let go of the version of life you were told to want. You walked away from the people who didn't choose you. And in doing so, you chose yourself. You chose peace. You chose real. Keep going. She's watching now. I closed the journal, turned off the light, and curled into bed beside the best thing I've ever created. My life isn't perfect. But it's honest. And after everything I've been through, that's more than enough.